Well, thank you so much, Polly, for being here today. This is a little bit different for me, and I'm really excited to speak to you about um, the story of, well, my story, Carter's story, my family's story, and the foundation's story, um, how we all got to where we are today.
Yeah.
And I couldn't pick a better person to have a conversation with about this today.
Oh, that feels so good to hear. Emily, I've found myself curious and interested in you and your personal story since I got to meet you the first time you invited me to podcast with you. And I just felt like, gosh, there's something so rich inside of this woman. And I want to know more. And if I want to know more, I can't be alone. And I think you're so generous in being willing to share more about what brought you to this place of wanting to give so much to so many, where it comes from. And I'm all ears. I'm going to ask all the questions that come for me. And if I go too far and ask too many or they're too personal, please just feel free to say no to that one.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm an open book.
Okay.
Um,
So, Emily, can I start?
yeah, let's get started.
Okay. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about, I mean, you're in such a, I don't even know your timeline. And I know that that there's a little person named Carter.
Hmm.
And I kind of feel like, where does the story begin of you and Carter and your family? And I kind of get chills in my body as I say that because I feel like there's probably something so important in this answer. And so I'll
Yeah.
just let you go where you want to go.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how this is special for me because we are, it's been 8 years since Carter passed away. And I feel
Mm.
like I've done a lot of healing over the years, and in so many areas life goes on, and I've moved on, and I don't talk about this that often, hardly any anymore. So it is so special for me to revisit those memories, because even though they are, some of them are sad, they're going there and feeling those feelings is really special to me, and I'm
Mm.
always still in awe of it when I can get there,
It's
if
so
that makes
sacred.
any sense.
Oh, it sure does. Wow. And it lives in its own sacred space within you too, I imagine,
Yeah.
for you to open it up and talk about it it's not nothing. It's really something.
Yeah. So when let's see, 10 years ago, well, actually, I guess that was almost 11 years ago,
Mm.
Carter was born. He's my second child. I had a little girl who was almost 5, and we lived in Kansas City, and Carter was born healthy. I had a full-term pregnancy, and I delivered him vaginally, and everything. We went home from the hospital, okay, and he was a champ at nursing, and very hungry guy, good weight and everything. And then 2 days, I think it was, well, no, when he was 6 days old, I guess it was when he was 5 days old, was when he all of a sudden that night started presenting with some symptoms. And at the time, as most people wouldn't have any idea until they go through an experience, or if they have an education background in this particular, in any kind of medical thing they're dealing with. I had no idea that there was something wrong at first, but he was crying a lot that night, and he all of a sudden didn't want a nurse, and so
Mm.
he would like try and latch on because he was hungry, and then he'd just like pull away, and he'd just cry, and we were just like, what in the world?
Mm.
And my only experience was my older daughter, and she um, did have colic. And
Mm.
back when Elizabeth was a baby. I was super young. I had Elizabeth when I was just 22.
Mm,
Um, she cried all the time and she was on medicine for reflux. And I found out that's when I stopped having dairy because I just noticed lots of things were irritating her. So that
mm,
was my only experience. So I kind of didn't know that like that colic doesn't start that early at 5 days old. And I also thought like maybe that's normal and he's just going to cry a lot like Elizabeth.
mhm,
And knowing what I know now about like holistic health, I probably could have figured out some more things with Elizabeth that about why she was so fussy. I don't want to just chalk it up to she cries for no reason because I don't believe that.
mhm,
But it turns out that the night went on and we put Carter in the little swing. Tried that. We tried putting him in like this little vibrating seat.
mhm,
And my husband and I were like, man, this is going to be a long night. He's going to be just like Elizabeth. We thought we had like this little perfect, easy baby because he was nursing right away. And meanwhile, Elizabeth took 2 weeks to learn to nurse.
mm,
Um, and then we said, well, in the morning, we'll call the doctor. Um, we didn't see any reason to call the doctor yet at that point.
mhm.
So then it was a long night. And the next morning, first thing, we called the pediatrician, went in there, and the pediatrician said that they couldn't see anything wrong. And they were so sweet. One of them, that was a nurse practitioner, he said, let me take him. And he walked up and down the hallway with him. And he said, I just want to check a few things out and see if like if he's still rooting. And he even said, it sounds silly, he said sometimes there's like a little, maybe there's a hair wrapped around his genitalia or something that's just like,
Mm,
or his toe that's just like irritating him. So we looked at everything, and he's like, I just can't see anything. He had no fever, no
mm,
rash or anything. And he said, why don't you come back after lunch, and when the head pediatrician is here, and I'll have him take a look. And so we went and got lunch, and then the nurse practitioner called me back and said, you know what? I don't really feel comfortable with that. I think you should go to the hospital, the children's hospital here.
And was
Um,
Carter still agitated and upset
yeah,
during that? Okay. Yeah.
yeah, he was agitated. Um, and so we were like, oh, wow, okay. So we headed over to um, one hospital right by us. We have a great children's hospital called Children's Mercy, Kansas City. And
Mm,
we headed to one of their hospitals, and they checked him out in the ER. And again, they didn't have a fever, no rash, nothing. And the nurse said to me, or the intake nurse said, you know, in a situation like this where we can't find anything wrong, but we do need to go through certain protocols now at this point to do some testing. We're going to want to do a spinal tap, and we're
mhm,
going to want to see if what's causing is there, rule out any bacterial, maybe meningitis infections. And so I was thinking, wow, well, what is meningitis? And she said, shared what that is, and it's not totally uncommon. And she said, I said, what's the, she said, you're going to have to unfortunately stay overnight. And I was like, oh God, no. And at that time I thought that's like the worst.
mm,
And I said, what would that look like if he has bacterial meningitis? And she goes, well, we can give him medicine to treat that, and you'd probably be here for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the worst. Little did I know, I think back on that and I'm like,
mm.
it can always get so much worse. That was not the worst.
Oh, that just gives me chills so deeply to imagine you had no idea where you were in relationship to what was about to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
okay.
no one ever does.
Mm,
And that's kind of what, the interesting thing to me. I think it's fascinating, um, where we all are. It gave me definitely so many different perspectives.
mm,
And I became so much more empathetic because of this and many other life experiences.
mm.
But we checked in and stayed overnight. They needed to do that spinal tap to check for certain infections that they can only um, see through that spinal fluid. And
Okay.
so, unfortunately, they had a really hard time with a baby that young. Getting a spinal tap on them is, first of all, not easy. And if they're
Oh.
dehydrated, I guess, which he would be if he hadn't been drinking,
Mm.
it's even harder. So they had to keep poking him, and they kept being unsuccessful with that for quite a few times. And then they finally did get him eventually. And we stayed overnight. Matt went home. My husband Matt went home with Elizabeth, and they hooked up Carter for some fluids and monitors. They wanted to monitor him overnight, and respiratory and his heart and everything. And it was fine that night. I think he had some peace. And then the next day I was holding him, and he's still hooked up to everything. And all of a sudden I was ordering breakfast on the phone, and all of a sudden he started going like, and that's all he did, like a weird, face movement. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And I actually used to have seizures. I had epilepsy when I was a teenager. And so I thought, that doesn't look right at all. And so I called the nurses, and they came in, and they didn't see anything at the moment because he had stopped doing that. And they said, it's probably nothing, but we're just going to come in and check him out. And it was really quick. They swept him up, and I was like moved off to the side. Next thing I know, there's a social worker in there with me. And then all of a sudden, Carter's like repeatedly seizing, and they're trying to stabilize him. And all I could hear are things um, like they're just trying to get him breathing and get stats on him. And there was multiple people, doctors all around him now at this point, from different specialties. And I'm just like, what's going on? What's going on? And the social worker's just like, it's okay. Is there someone we can call? And so I called
That's how.
Matt. Yeah, I called Matt, and I said, you need to come here now. And then
Mm.
I don't remember the total. The thing about this is I don't remember the entire timeline exactly. But
Mhm.
then it was like, next thing they said, we need to transfer him as soon as we can get him stabilized. We need to transfer him to the other hospital that has the prenatal ICU.
Whew. Just
Yeah.
imagine.
So I'm like,
What
wow,
a-
okay. And so then they had him all in like a little incubator looking thing, and rolled him out. And as soon as they could get him to calm his little body down and enough to go in an ambulance and take that ride, I went in the front of the ambulance, and he was in the back. And then Matt met us down there. And at that point they took him, and I wasn't there for a little bit. And
Hmm.
when they returned, so this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me. When they returned, it was, he has global brain damage now, because all of those events just caused his brain to, uh, I guess, a loss of oxygen.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and he had a brain bleed as well during that time.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Just
Yeah,
sort of taking all that in, just imagining what it was like to be you going from like, oh, someone's colicky to this in less than 24 hours.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
the shock
six
of that.
days of life. And at that point, what they also said when they came in is that they didn't know if he'd even live. Um, it
Oh,
was really bad. And at that point,
mm.
it and they did say if he did live, that he was maybe probably wouldn't hear, see, always be on a feeding tube, probably have seizures
Oh,
for the rest of his life, and on and on and on.
oh.
Um,
Can you remember at all what it was like to be you in that moment, or is it fuzzy or blank? Do you remember your inner experience?
well, I think I just started to shut down,
Yeah.
and go very numb. Um, and I really leaned on my family a lot at that moment. For all I know, I don't remember every little detail anymore, but for all I know, it was Matt who called my family, in New Jersey. And I'm one of 4 kids. I'm the youngest, and they all have their own lives and kids and my siblings, and everyone scheduled to come out right away. And they all packed black clothes because everyone expected a funeral while they were here.
Oh,
Um, and they just said they couldn't imagine. I mean, at this point, my family hadn't met him yet, couldn't imagine him passing away and them not even getting to meet him yet. So they wanted to hurry as quickly as they could. I believe my parents just drove. They just left and drove.
mm.
Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it was really a lot quickly. And at that
Mm.
point, I was recovering from having a baby, which is a lot. When someone has a baby, you are, you know, sore, bleeding, taking care of yourself, hopefully. Um,
And still kind of recovering from just whatever trauma that brought or
your
whatever,
hormones, all of it.
association. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whew.
But at that point, I just like set myself aside, and I didn't care about that or how I felt at that point. I say obviously because to me, I guess it's obvious, but I just didn't anymore. And that had led to many years of me trying to figure out, I will say, how to not be suppressed and how to feel again. And um, like I said, sometimes it feels good to feel for me because it's something I'm still working on.
Because you put that in a chamber in that moment of shutdown that got locked and held kind of deep inside. Is that what you mean when you say that?
I think so.
Mhm.
Maybe that's just a story, but that's my occurring of it.
Yeah, well, your story is
I don't want to. I acknowledge though that I don't want to get caught in that like it's real. I mean, it is real, but it's not like tangible. And
Mm,
and it can be that is something I also like to acknowledge and has helped me over the years is to not think like that is real. There are facts, but that isn't something like I didn't have this little chamber inside me and the door
yeah,
shut.
for sure. But just in terms of that, it's like the experience emotionally sounds like, you kind of did like a little maneuver like in your shell or kind of closed up.
I did, yeah.
Mm,
Um, so over the next, I'd say 48 hours, what happened was they had talked to us and they told us at some point during one of the conversations that we had um, with the doctors, they told my husband and I, we were like, so are you saying that, and I don't like this word, but I'm sure we asked I don't remember the exact words, but is he kind of in a vegetative state? Because that's kind of how they were describing it. Um,
mm,
and they said, well, we really don't know, and we don't even know if he's going to live. But if he does, these are the things that will probably transpire.
mm,
And we were thinking, then do we want to take him? He's on life support. Do we want to take him off life support? Should we? And they said, well, that's really up to you. It's something that you may want to consider. And so I know we were the ones who asked that question,
mm.
but you know, when they describe it in that way, we want to know what are the options in front of us and what are the things we need to think about um, that we never thought we'd need to think about. And
Wow.
so then my husband and I went, I remember we went outside onto a bench in front of the hospital and cried and talked and prayed and in the end we decided that we did not want to take him off. We wanted to just see what happened. And within 24 hours of having that conversation, he did start to take breaths on his own. So the way it works when you're on a ventilator or on life support, the way I understand it is like they can tell you are being supported to breathe, but they can tell when the body is starting to try. And so maybe it's not trying enough to take off the ventilator yet, but he was starting to try. And so then it was like, wow, all of a sudden he's turning around. And then then he was taking breaths on his own. So they took him off life
Wow.
support. And that was within 24 hours of wondering if we should take him off to let him go, just wondering. And then that's where we were. I think we stayed in there for a few weeks. He had seizures. It had to learn how to change a feeding tube. They had me take a CPR class. A lot of things like that went on. And again, their prediction of what his life would be like did not change. Um, and we talked to many neurologists and many different doctors. There was maybe one doctor in there who was actually an eye doctor who gave us one little bit of hope. Um, Everyone else was pretty like, yeah, he's not going to have, he'll never do this, he'll never do this, he'll never do this. And there's nothing you can do but take him home and love him, was all, that was kind of the answers. And they also said you can never nurse him. They had the lactation consultant came in who those, they push nursing, and
Yeah.
they said you can't. They did a swallow study, and they thought that he didn't pass it, and they said he might aspirate, the liquid go down the wrong way, and then you
Mm.
would have liquid in your lungs, and they said you can't nurse him, sorry. And it was a lot. At
Oh,
that point I was still pumping, and they were giving him my milk.
oh my goodness.
um and we tried many times over those weeks to ask, but maybe this we found on the internet. And one doctor said to me, Matt, you could waste a lot of time and money on things, but we can't recommend them, and they will probably be a waste of time and money,
Mm.
something along those lines. And that stood out to me. There's many things that don't stand out, but one of the things that I feel, as a side note,
Mm.
I feel pretty strongly that it would be really nice if the doctors and nurses and people who come in contact with someone going through a traumatic experience,
Mm.
if they could pay very close attention to their words,
Mm.
that would be
Just,
so amazing, because the things that are said in those moments, people get left with them.
ah,
And they may be something that is, someone said something to me that is like a sliver of hope that I can cling to, or they
mhm.
may have said something that really just left me in a very disempowering place.
Mhm. But they really live on in perpetuity in your heart, in your mind. Certain things that
And,
get said, maybe in a flippant way, can last forever.
I don't doubt at all that people didn't mean well. I think they all do, especially if people who are nurses and doctors and social workers, they're in this place, they're in their professions because they like to help people.
Yeah.
But I think from on the flip side, if they could really be trained to to mind their words very carefully,
Yeah.
because those words will stick with someone forever,
Mm.
or they could.
Are you aware, Emily, of what words you almost wish you could just edit out? Like that would have allowed you to kind of keep your feet on the ground or stay more present or
Yeah,
stay more empowered.
yeah. I interviewed um, these two musicians a couple months ago, the Francisco, this is what they're called, Francisco. And one of them had Thorald, he had a very similar experience to ours.
Mm.
And he and I had a great conversation about that. And one thing that he told me is, if you could just say, I don't know what will be, or I don't know what your life will look like.
Yeah.
Because, you know, for me, because Carter has never been before. And
Right.
so I can't tell you. Now, I can tell you the facts don't look good, but I cannot tell you what Carter's going to look like
Because I don't know.
I don't know.
Wow,
And
that's
that would be just so much better to admit, acknowledge that,
yeah.
and to leave someone with that in my mind than to leave them with a list of never to be's and zero possibilities
And predictions.
and predictions. Because what happens is people live into things. Any
Mhm,
label, any label,
mhm,
people just live into it. And it can help to know like the direction. These are the facts. Um, you are presenting with these symptoms, or you have this condition. Those labels are useful in guiding what treatments you might do,
mhm,
but I don't believe that they are useful to cling to,
mhm,
because sometimes it actually happens. People cling to that so hard that they can't get out of it or see any other possibility.
mhm. They develop a tunnel vision for
Yeah.
that. Mm,
And that doesn't work, because often it doesn't work, because some of the things that can happen there, one, I can tell you, as a wife and a parent whose child had a traumatic experience like that,
mhm,
um, they the couple, they can go leave and take away different things from a situation, and one of them might say, I believe that exactly what that doctor said. Nothing's going to happen. That doctor went to medical school. They're a neurologist, for goodness sake. Nothing. They're right. I'm wrong. Nothing else is going to be possible for my kid.
the possibilities shut down for one person.
Could happen. It
Could happen.
does happen. And that's just one example of how it happens, but it happens in all different little ways. How you grieve. We all
Mm,
can grieve differently, as you know. And that's why it helps to, talk to someone who can help you as a couple work through things.
mhm,
Um, but the divorce rates, it's high for just in the country, for any normal situation, but it's even higher if your child has special needs,
mhm,
or if your child had some sort of an accident or an injury, and even higher if your child has died.
mhm.
So we're talking about like 80-90% if at that point when your child's died.
As you mentioned that, Emily, I wonder if you would be able to speak to your experience with your partner,
Mm-hmm.
like the potentially different roads that you got on in the moment of doctors intervening, making predictions, telling you what was possible, what would never be possible. Did you each kind of go in slightly different directions? And if so, can you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. We were pretty lucky in that, I will say, it's coincidence, maybe not, but we had both just started some, I don't know what you call it, self-development work
Mm,
in the year or two prior to having Carter. And
mhm,
it was such perfect timing for us.
mm,
Um, there's all different kinds of self-development work, obviously, but what we had done, um, is started, I took the landmark forum and I took the advanced course all before Carter was born.
mhm,
Um, and Matt had taken both of those, and probably some more stuff. Maybe he had taken like a communications course or something,
mhm,
which just that alone, it was like a weekend or something. I don't know what it was, but I remember him coming home from that. And that was when I thought, like, he kept saying, you should take this course. And I
mhm.
was like, no, thanks, no, thanks, no, thanks. Cause I don't like anyone telling me what to do. It's if you tell me what to do, I will do the opposite. It's
Uh-huh.
not always a good thing, but, it wasn't until I saw like a difference in Matt and all of a sudden he could communicate very well with me in a different way. I was like, okay. And then I said, I think I'll take this course. And I, at the time, had said, I think I'll take this course because my mom is going through something and I think I can help her. or,
That was
excuse
your
me,
motivation.
or maybe I can help her. And so I was visiting my parents in New Jersey and I had signed up for the Landmark Forum. That's where I took it. And at that time, I didn't even know I was pregnant with Carter. And it's funny because after that course, I found out I was pregnant during that time.
Mm.
And I feel like it just all prepared me a little bit,
For what was
because
to
what
come.
was to come. Because I all of a sudden, I kind of can't describe. I've actually now taken the Landmark Forum. Not that you need to do it more than once, but for me, I wanted to over the years after Carter died. I did go back and take those courses again. Um, but it just helped me to figure things out for myself and to stand in a different place and to not get stuck in certain
Mm.
conversations.
Mhm.
Um, but so when he was sick, I shut down, and Matt was in the mode of, um, often one couple is this way. He went into like fix it mode. And he
Mhm.
was like researching. And between him and my sister looking into things, they were the ones who kind of took control. And I didn't want to be part of even a lot of the conversations with the doctors at that point. So they would step outside and do it privately. And I would just be like, I'm not listening.
And at that point, was that because you were over threshold? It was just too much and you needed to kind of shut down and protect yourself? Or was it more a function of like, I don't like the way they're delivering this information. It's too disempowering. What was it like for
I
you?
want to say it was that second one, but it was probably that. I mean, I remember I couldn't look certain people. If I didn't, I couldn't even look. Like my in-laws came to the hospital. I wouldn't even look. I remember going to the cafeteria and I wouldn't look anyone in the eye. I was
Yeah.
just like a numb zombie.
Yeah.
I was just,
You were just dealing with you.
I was just, yeah.
Yeah.
And Matt had found at that point, while still in the hospital, he had found this place called in Marin called the Anat Ben-Yael method. And Anat Ben-Yael is an Israeli woman, who, I don't know how long she's lived here, out in Marin, but she has, and I also don't remember how old her center in Marin is in San Rafael. But he was looking at these videos on like YouTube or something of her working with some children who had brain injuries. And there was this one little girl that she worked with when she was still pretty early in her career. And her name was Elizabeth. And I think Elizabeth, I'm probably gonna, I don't want to say what she had because I don't want to butcher my the diagnosis, but she had severe injury, and they did not give a good prediction for her. But Anat saw her when she was older, I'll say. Maybe she was a teenager or something at that point. I don't remember exactly, but you can look this up, Elizabeth and Anat Ben-Yael. We can link to it on YouTube. And Elizabeth ended up, being able to function, to find love in life, to go
Mm.
to get married, to dance at her wedding.
Well,
And so
you went
because
beyond your prognosis, way beyond.
yes, and so Matt called up Anat's office and told them our story and said, "We're still in the hospital, but I'm wondering if this is something that you think that we could come out and do um, with Carter." And she has a lot of practitioners. She's trained hundreds. And he said, "But we would want to see Anat. That would be if we're going to come out to California, that's what we want to do." So they said, "Absolutely, we can help you." And they said, "Just let us know when you're out of the hospital and we'll
Mm.
get you on over here. We will make room for you."
Mm.
So we told them when we got out, and we decided to drive out there because at that point, we were very concerned about Carter's brain and we didn't want to go on an airplane and thought it was just safer to drive from Kansas City to California.
So as I understand it, when you say that, you did then Carter stabilized enough to be able to leave the hospital?
Eventually, after I think it was only 17 days, I want to say,
Okay, and they said you can take your baby home?
they taught me how to change a feeding tube. They
Uh-huh.
taught us CPR.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I couldn't feed, I couldn't, they said I could not nurse him.
Right.
And they gave me some thickener
Mm,
to thicken my milk in a bottle, which he drank very slowly.
mhm.
Um, but that's how that looked. And they said, call these services, state paid for services, to do physical therapy and have a nurse come and visit at the house.
Okay.
And those were the only things that were offered or suggested.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
and so Matt said, would you like to go to California? You asked how me and Matt were dealing. And I just said, sure. I said, fine. Like I was just kind of very numb, dismissive. And Matt was like, I'm figuring something out. He just tried very, very hard
On mission. Mhm.
on multiple levels, not just a knot. He called actually Johns Hopkins. At first, he was seeing if we should move to a different hospital. And at that point, we knew nothing about brain injuries. And he was going down, do we need surgery? Is there something that can help? Is there anything? He he contacted Ben Carson's office. Do you know Ben Carson?
Yeah. Mhm.
He contacted them and they were the ones who said what you need is rehabilitative care. And I think that's when he started changing his searches online. And that's part of when he found a knot via Google search. Um,
Wow. What a functioner, huh? I mean, you're married to somebody who's really functioning in this moment of just shock and adjustment that's so profound.
yeah, yeah, that was definitely that is a strong suit of Matt.
Mm.
Um,
Not to say you weren't functioning, I'm just noticing, like, his way, like, because that was the question I asked you a little bit, like, which way did you guys both go? And he went into sort of major high functioning, solve it, fix it, get the right
he
people in.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now there's a different aspect. There's different layers to that. There's also we grieved differently and dealt with things differently once we settled and decided what the course of action were. We were very much doing our own thing and have had years of, not things not being easy as well.
I believe
I
you.
could speak to that too, but I feel like I want to, I don't know, I feel like I want to move on to, we're now in California.
Okay, do it.
So we go to California and we met with a knot and a doctor who works for her as a full-time practitioner now. He is not practicing as a doctor anymore, though, but he did go to medical school and did practice in England. His name's Neil. And they met with us. They wanted to see his MRI and they asked a lot of questions because Neil could look at it and read it. And um, they, here's what Anat and Neil said that was fantastic.
Mm,
They never promised us that they could heal him, that any changes would happen, that this would be worth our time and money. They didn't.
mhm,
Um, but what they left space for in their actions, their way of being, their language
mhm,
was possibility.
mm,
They said, we don't know what's possible. We have seen kids do things that their parents were told they would never be able to do,
wow.
but we cannot promise anything. And all we can do is try.
Mm,
And it is a non-invasive thing. It's just slow movement with attention, which I believe everyone can use. Um, that's why, things like yoga are also powerful for people. Um,
mhm.
but that's kind of
Tai Chi.
what it
Like,
is. Yeah. And
yeah.
that's kind of similar to what it what it is.
That's amazing. Wow.
Um, but just that place that we were in, that little office in San Rafael, we felt safe
Mm,
and we felt room for possibility. And
mm,
we didn't think back where we were in Kansas City in our limited experience of Carter being diagnosed and what we were told there, we were just like left in a place, a disempowering place, we should say. And now we didn't go seeking lots of other practitioners in the area because I'm sure that they are everywhere. I now know there's lots of different doctors and practitioners of many different things that we could speak to who would be fantastic for us. But that one thing that was different when we went into Knott's office made Matt and I go back and say, maybe we should move here for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And he needed to stay working. The lessons were very expensive. They are very expensive. And insurance doesn't pay for a lot of complementary treatments. But he was working on a project in Florida, and he said, I'll go work there and worry about this. You move out there with Elizabeth if I was okay with it, and I was. You could move to we'll rent a townhouse, and you can move out there with Elizabeth and Carter and go to lessons 5 days a week. And so we thought 5 days a week for 6 months, we would be in a place that we felt safe and supported and leaving room for possibility in what is to be or what can be.
Mm-hmm.
So then we stayed for 6 months. And as 6 months approached, we thought, we really like it here. We're going to move here. So then we stayed there. Yeah. And over Carter's, now to give you to step back a little bit and let anyone know who's listening, Carter passed away when he was exactly 20 months old. We didn't know that was coming, but I want you all to know that over the course of his little life, we tried many different things as we started to feel more comfortable. And what I will say, we always tried things that would do no harm, but we could just try and see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And if they worked, great. We'd do more of it. And if they didn't, no big deal. We can set it aside.
Wow,
But he was very comfortable in his little body.
Oh, is that right? That he grew comfortable in his body in that time?
Yeah,
In the sense
often
of,
kids who have brain injuries, they go one of two ways, and they may become really rigid and like tight and, keeping their little fists up and like you're constantly flexing your muscles.
mm-hmm.
And it's so uncomfortable. And we can all imagine if you were to hold your body that tight for a long time, it would cause damage in your structure. And just imagine that you could never relax. And then the other way that some kids go is they become very loose, like low muscle tone.
Okay.
And Carter was the one who would tend to get rigid, spastic, they call it. And I think because his little body was trained from so long to check in and to feel, oh, there's my spine. Oh, I feel that. And you would just see on his face. They worked with him in such a way that he would his little eyes would be like, oh, I can feel that.
Oh, you could literally witness.
You could literally, and another interesting thing about ABM is not every practitioner does this, but Anat videotapes every single session. I thought it was weird at first because so going back, one of the miracles that happened, maybe a miracle, maybe not a miracle, maybe that's just what happens when you do the things that we did with Carter, but he did start to nurse. He never stopped trying to nurse. He kept rooting and like he was hungry. And I secretly in the closet, would be like, let me just try. And I noticed that if my milk came out too fast, he would pull off. And it taught me that he started to learn.
He was titrating. He was regulating his own swallow reflex a little bit, huh?
Yeah, and it made sense to me. Now, I know this is not right for everyone, and I don't think that everyone should go out and ignore what their doctor said. I don't want anyone to go with that. But what I will say is it made sense to me for Carter because I thought, gosh, if we can learn how to eat and swallow and do different things, why can't we learn how to swallow again or to, how to drink again? And
Mm.
so over the course of my time, very early on, working, Anat would work while he was like nursing and snuggling to my breast,
Wow.
and she's videotaping, and he started to nurse. That was one of the very first things that happened.
What a green light, huh?
It was beautiful, yeah.
Oh,
And he nursed for his entire life, and it was a
oh
wonderful
my
bonding
gosh.
bonding opportunity, and also, good for his little brain. And
Wow. It speaks so much too to your earlier point of people making medical professionals making prognoses that were premature and didn't account for what was possible that you ultimately discovered just in the days ahead with Anat. Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, um,
Mm.
yeah. So,
I can't even imagine what that moment might have been like for you inside of all of the moments, just the one where his own natural instincts, his body's innate drive to eat kicked in, his little body started to react and respond positively in some ways to the therapy. It just must have been
mhm.
incredibly, I don't even know what word to put on it. Like, what was that like for you?
Well, it helped me to see that there was hope.
Yeah.
Um, some of the other things, speaking of hope, that really helped me, I was left with feeling very scared of what was to come in this life that I had no idea how to lead.
Yeah.
Um, and I remember it was a very small waiting room in Anat's office, and the one in San Rafael, only a few practitioners work there full time. And I was there every day, and I would meet people who came from all over the world to see her. Because most people come for they might come from across the country or from another country and stay for a week.
Wow.
Or that's kind of how people usually do it. But we just decided we were going to go all in, um, because we were able to work that out for ourselves. Fortunately, very fortunately.
Mhm.
um, I know that that is not possible for most people. But I would meet so many people because you're just sitting in that waiting room, and everyone looks at each other and they're all in the same or similar place and saying, what happened to your child? That's kind of the question. Like, what's your story? And
Mm,
and so I would hear all these different stories. And it
mm,
started to make me, there was this one little boy named Cypress. Um, and his mom, Amy, was holding him, and they live out in Oakland and came pretty frequently. And they were sitting across from us, and Cypress was just a toddler, and he was like looking, he clearly had, I didn't know what cerebral palsy was then, but he had a lot of motor delays, and I didn't know what, but he had something going
mhm.
on. And he was just looking at us and he smiled. And then he got down, and at that point, he could crawl, and he came over and he said, "I love you." Maybe it was even slower than that, but I was just like, "Oh my gosh." And Amy is just like, kind of like you, and just a bright light, like she's just like a person that you just see and it's like, looks like the sun is shining on you. You're just so like, you've got this like energy about you.
Mm.
And yeah, I do think that about you. And I heard their story, and so, what happened to Cyprus and how he came to be. Um,
Mm.
and I was just thinking that was the first moment where I felt like this life can be very beautiful. and this future can be beautiful.
Well, I just want to pause there and just really take that moment in with you because ah, what an opening,
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
know, to
Yeah.
have even a sliver of that door of this can be beautiful
Mhm.
open for you and open even through the eyes of someone else in the waiting room and through this little Cypress person.
Mm.
What a stunning moment.
Mhm. Yeah, and Cypress, by the way, he is the young man who is actually on the homepage of thebrainpossible.com.
Okay. Wow.
He's still so special to me. I don't know how old he is in that picture, but maybe 13, 10,
Oh, wow.
somewhere between there. Maybe he's 13 now, but we took that picture a couple years ago. Remarkable young man. It took him a long time to walk, and I loved to see this progression. But he eventually started to walk. And it doesn't always, it's going to be different for everyone, even if your kid is healthy. They didn't have any obvious um, injury or anything that had happened to them. They might be typically developing, but you don't know when they're going to walk. And I think that it's good to acknowledge that and to never stop trying. Of course, we don't want to get stuck in like the rat race of it, but to just stay in a place of possibility as much as possible.
Yeah. It's interesting as you say that. I imagine there's this balancing point between accepting what is in front of you
Yes,
and being open to possibility,
yes,
and just
exactly.
both being so important and yet also pretty different.
Yeah, it is. You're exactly right. It's a balancing act.
Hmm.
And I think one step that helps with that is acknowledging that it's a balancing act
Hmm.
and that that's okay.
Hmm.
But it's almost like meditation in that you are keep bringing yourself back to, you know,
This moment.
this moment. And one of the most amazing things about Carter is he taught everyone around him to be present and to enjoy the moment,
Mm.
because that little boy didn't ever, most kids don't actually, for a long time, but he didn't think about anything but this moment. And if he was with you, he was with you. And if
Mm.
he was looking at you and he was comfortable, or he was at anything, he's there. And and that's often the way it is with a lot of kids who have neurological conditions, that they are very present to this moment. And even if they keep that when they get older, people around them can see that, and there's something to learn from that.
Mm. Something to experience too.
Yeah.
'Cause I imagine if they are living in this moment, it's really hard for us to engage with them any other way. We're I can't be in the future and be with someone like Carter. If he's in the moment and I want to be there too, I have to be present with that, right? Like I get to drop in and just be there too. I don't know if I'm coming through clearly, but I know that when I'm sitting with somebody who is present and in this moment, I am called to this moment too. Takes
Yes.
me out of my head and out of my planning and out of my doomsdaying and anything else that I might want to be up to in my with my little forebrain. It just gets me to drop in. Did you notice that you could just drop in more swiftly or more easily with when Carter was with you?
Yes. Maybe I didn't even acknowledge it at that, put words to it at that time. But yes, I did that all the time, 100% of the time. I didn't look too far ahead of me.
Mm,
Um,
what a gift.
and there is, definitely a place for planning. It's wonderful to be able to plan, and it's great to, plan out your year. But then again, as we all know, this last year, I remember in the beginning of 2020, I had just set up my strategic objectives for this year, for last year. And I spent time doing that. going over it, editing them, planning, and then that just got thrown out the window. And
Reality had a different plan.
right, and that happened for many people.
Hmm.
And it is again a balancing act to, acknowledge and appreciate what's right here today. Because that actually does, there are studies that show that appreciating what's here today and being grateful, learning to be grateful for even the little things, it changes your brain.
That's right.
It's actually something I'm working on right now.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
oddly enough, it's not always that easy to do. It's like a nice thing to do. It always lived as a nice thing to do to look for things to be grateful for. Like, yeah, that works. Do it every day. There's that Start Today journal by Rachel Hollis. And I've, written down a couple and then put it aside for ever.
Mhm,
But when forced to look every day for 3 things you're grateful for, it changes your brain.
mhm.
And same thing if you were to look and be present, it changes your brain. And I love
Yeah,
that.
that's huge, and I think we get forced into that when we get into really tough places, and
Mhm.
forced to both be present, but even to drop into that gratitude, feel it, actually live in that place, as
Mm.
opposed to do an exercise with our brain about thinking about the things we're grateful for. Like,
Mhm.
I imagine that there's also, do you know what I mean? There's also moments
Yes.
where we actually really are alive and present to it.
And that's the magic of it. And it doesn't happen every time for me. Sometimes it's only the practice of really looking for
Yeah.
me currently.
Yeah, no, excavating
But
is really good. It's kind of, that's the brain training part of it. So that when
yeah.
something does show up that's worthy of gratitude and really dropping into it, you can. And I
Um,
hear that Carter was he was a conduit for that in some ways for you.
he was.
Mm.
He was. I 100% believe that.
Mm.
Um, well,
So is,
I
do you want to get back to, not that we've, I love where we're going, and do you want to also kind of keep in
yeah, I
the story?
mean, I could go on and on about the many details for 20 months and beyond. But I
Mhm.
guess what my mind is going to, what do you want to know next? What my mind is going to is how we got to be where we are today. Um,
Well,
but
I guess, I mean, just to fill in a little tiny bit is that what I imagine is that you stayed for 6 months in San Rafael with
mhm.
working with Anna. Is that right?
Yeah, and then we decided to make that move official.
And
So
then,
we officially moved to California.
okay. And then you continued to do whatever you did in terms of therapy and being with Carter and
Yeah.
seeing what was possible and bonding with him.
Hmm.
And he passed at 20 months.
Yeah. Sorry. I had to
Okay.
pause for a cough. Um, yeah, so like I said, we had a beautiful life with Carter and we
Mm,
did live in the moment, but we also looked to the future and not to give false hope, but we first of all wouldn't call him special needs. We, I, I even said that term earlier in this conversation, but I want you to know that for us, we didn't want to label him at all. So we
mhm,
didn't. He was Carter. He
mhm,
wasn't something else.
mm.
And we also would joke, he'd get tight and spastic and we'd say, maybe he'll be a rower at Harvard. We left
Yeah.
it open to any possibility. We
Yeah.
weren't, well, I don't think we were crazy. Maybe some people think we were. Probably there's people who think that's crazy, but we were just open
Yeah.
to anything.
Mm.
Um, and
So,
then,
yeah,
yeah,
go
we
ahead.
tried all sorts of different things. Hyperbaric oxygen chamber eventually came in our world, and stem cell therapy. I have a little girl home from school, and lots of nutrition. I started making my own food for him, cooking slow stocks and making sure that he got lots of fat in his diet. And we went to the Family Hope Center, and they taught me exercises, things to do at home with him and to heighten his senses, sensory things.
Mm.
Lots of different good rich therapy.
Oh, I can feel that the breadcrumbs of the beginnings of the brain possible sort of in this,
Yeah.
these
And
little
with
interventions.
yes, and we did a lot of cranial sacral eventually, and that helped him with some of his spasticity. He had like his skull was tight and kind of sunken because his brain wasn't very big. It doesn't grow if it's not living. All parts of it aren't living. So then he had a smaller skull, and he went and did. He was part of a study in San Francisco for. He had cortical vision impairment, and we saw doctors for that. Lots of different things. But throughout everything we did, there was that same thread and theme of, balancing that there is possibility in his future. And we weren't stuck in what that was. And we acknowledged that things would be different for him. But we didn't know, we left room for him to grow into himself. And we did not know that his life was going to be short. Um, actually, things were not easy. I will not say that we just lived in this little bubble and things were great, just balancing. Things
Mm.
were hard in marriage. Um,
Oh, I can imagine
Having to
that.
work that much to pay all those bills, I was thinking I was ready to sell my engagement ring, whatever we needed to do. Somehow we always came up with the money. Sometimes only twice, maybe we had to ask ABM if we could pay next month.
Mm.
That wasn't like a regular thing for us, but that happens sometimes.
Mhm.
Sometimes our family supported us,
Wow.
but
The
we
commitment.
didn't know that things were going to be cut short, I will say.
Okay.
And back when he was alive, I started taking training to be a not Beniel method practitioner. And I thought, well, I need to work with Carter for the rest of his life. It would be helpful. And I thought, what would be amazing is if one day when we have the money, we wanted to start a school.
Mm.
And we thought that would be wonderful. It would help us and other children. We could start a school and have a foundation with scholarships in Marin for kids to get dropped off and do all these therapies. And
Oh my gosh, it was in you
yeah,
to
and
create something.
yeah, it was. And then when he passed away, I was still doing my ABM training, and people said, "Are you still going to start your school?" And I thought, gosh, I don't think I have that in me anymore.
Mm.
But I did some more development work, and I thought a lot and journaled a lot. And I thought what I could do is I can build a website, because at that time there was no one website I could find that would give me information and options. Not
Yeah.
saying false hope for anything, but here's all the options, because
Here's
I
what
didn't, yeah,
here's what exists even like.
exist. Exactly. Because every single one of those things I named and more, he did scalp acupuncture, and I did Epsom salt and baths and with him every single night, and I did water therapy or aqua water therapy in my hot tub, and Feldenkrais therapy. So we did all these things, and what I would hear about them through these stories of people, people would say, "Have you tried this? Have you seen that doctor
Mm.
in Pennsylvania or wherever?" And then we'd be like, "No, we haven't," and we'd hear their experience, and then we'd look into it,
Mm.
and that was how we heard about everything, was word of mouth.
Yeah.
And that is still often, even today, with anything we're looking for, that's like the best way to hear about things. You like to read reviews of things. I every day when I'm looking up something. And so I thought we can do that, and it
Yeah.
doesn't put me in a position that I didn't want to be in or was uncomfortable with. It was something I wanted to do. because I
Wow.
felt it was necessary.
Oh, wow. What a huge service. I mean, and you'd already been in the trenches enough to understand like how vast the map of options is, right? Like you have to be in it in a way to really understand like there are so many and
There
so
are.
diverse options. And I don't know, I haven't been in this in your shoes in any way, but I can imagine feeling like, well, which ones of these is valid? Where is there a snake oil salesman in here? Like, how do I determine where I put my money and my time and my attention in? Because all of this takes a lot of effort and a lot of resources. So just,
It
whoa.
does. Now, there's certainly people, trusted people that I have vetted or experienced with and have met other foundations even who've vetted people, like the Epidemic Answers Foundation, I love, very similar to us.
Oh, cool.
Um, and yeah, there's a lot of things you can learn online that are just like you're not sure about. Still think that one of the best ways is to find someone who's done it
Mm,
or who might be a little ahead of you. And even if it's just they've done a child with cerebral palsy, like they've raised a kid this far with cerebral palsy. If you could find someone who's a few years ahead of you or
very
one
cool.
step ahead of you, it's very helpful. Whether you're talking about a treatment or not, whether it's just doing this life,
Yeah.
to connect with someone, find someone, even if it's on a Facebook group or online, Instagram. There's a lot of people on there,
Hmm. They're a little
and
further down
chat
the road.
a little further down the road.
Oh,
I think that's the most helpful thing.
interesting.
But yeah, that's how and it wasn't quite that simple. We had this idea. I said at his funeral, Matt stood up and said, "We will start a foundation one day." We didn't have it yet. Um, but it wasn't until years later that we said, "Okay, it's time. We feel ready." And we wrote a book about Carter. It's called
That's harder.
Who is Carter? And then after the book was written, then I put together the nonprofit, the 501(c)(3), and we started planning our first event to raise money to build the website.
What year was that, Emily?
2017.
Oh my gosh. So not that you're still pretty young organization, huh?
Very young, yeah, and we've only had two events, well, two major events because this last year we were supposed to have our third,
Yeah.
but didn't. But we are going to have our third in April, whether no matter what things look like, it's going to be virtual as well, which is our first time doing virtual. But I
Mm,
think that's fun because it actually allows people since we're not a local organization here in Kansas City, we actually have worldwide uh, followers and supporters in a community. I think it's nice because other people can participate and
wow. That it
they're,
really is. It allows it to open up to so many more people.
yeah, there are positive things about what, COVID puts you in a position to look at other possibilities.
And Emily, I imagine that you have a life that's waiting for you and you probably have to get back to it. But do you have room for another question or two?
I totally do. I'm sorry that Scarlett's in the background, but
Oh, don't
she
talk
is.
to me. I love real life playing out just the way it does.
Yeah.
I got a dog scratching on my door. You've got a kid circling.
I have the dog and the kid.
Okay. Good. Let's just let it be real.
Yeah.
With the Brain Possible, are you and your partner kind of equally invested and involved, or is this your baby more, or is there some division of labor that you can describe to us? Because it's evident
Yeah.
that a lot of energy goes into
Yeah.
what you're doing. It's an incredible uh, achievement.
So Matt wrote the book, Who is Carter?
Mhm.
And we did it through a company called, well, they changed their name over the years, but it's called Scribe.
Uh-huh.
And they help you to craft your story
Mm,
by way of interviews. And I did write part of it by way of interviews, and the editor wrote it. But it's beautiful. It's not that long of a book, but it is Matt's, and I would say it's primarily Matt's in there. It's mostly from his voice, but it also has chapters by our friends in Denmark, one of the couples that we met on our journey that we are very inspired by. And my parents wrote about the experience in the book. My sisters wrote in the book. And then the foundation, though, I would say that's my baby. Matt is good with pulling together he's in charge of sponsorships, relationships in that way. And he is right there with me in the vision, but I am the one running. I'm the one doing the work.
Got it. It comes through that you put a ton of your life and your energy into it. I think the love that you bring to your family, to your story, to Carter, to the world, it's like it comes through everything that you do. I mean, I enjoy the podcast. I listen to what you share, and I think there's so much service here. There's so much gift in what you're bringing, and it is so generous. I just
Thank you. Sometimes it doesn't feel that. Sometimes for me, when things are, having a down day, it feels sometimes like, gosh, this is a lot of work. But
I mean, that you have down days even is a important thing for you to name.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. So it means a lot to hear that every time anyone writes in and says that they've been listening, or we've had people write in and say, my child was just diagnosed with this rare condition, and I've been so lost, and I'm so happy I found you. That
Is that the paycheck for you?
that is it. Yeah. And
That's where you get the fuel to keep going, or is that
yes. Yeah. I mean, that means so much to me, and to hear from our community is everything to me. I love it.
oh. So on the days where maybe you're running out of gas, that might be the thing that will potentially ignite you again and light you up to go forward. And when you're running out of gas, is it simply because there's a lot of work that goes into this? Like, can I just
Yeah, you want to know, it's a lot of work to bring in the money.
uh-huh.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to put yourself in a position of asking people for money.
Yeah.
It's fun too, but it's if I do want to acknowledge that foundations and nonprofits take a lot of work and time, and then sometimes I'm wearing many hats. I'm running social media, podcasts. I manage the SEO, the design,
God, you're learning.
the gala, the floral. Like, oh, this meeting's floral. This one's SEO. This one's podcast production.
Wow.
Kind
What do you
of
mean when you say floral?
floral at an event.
Oh, actual flowers at a physical
Yeah,
event. I'm like, oh, it's been so long since I've been to an event. I don't even remember what that means anymore.
I know. And
Oh
then we have
my
to.
God.
It's
So you
just,
do everything. You
yeah.
just get your
I
fingers in
have
the
we
pie
have a
where
little team. Yeah, but yeah, I try and corral it all.
Mhm.
But we have great people who in the past have worked with us and currently work with us. Actually, one of the things I'm really excited about this year, and I purposely was like, you know what, this is going to be this year. We've wanted to start a document. We wanted to do a documentary, something, not just any. We've created a few videos that are beautiful, actually. They're on our website, and we haven't maybe done the best job distributing them, so maybe not everyone's seen them, but we will post them again. I think we should post them again when this comes out so people can view some of our story. But this year we are going to um, start planning for a full-length documentary that we hope will get picked up by Netflix or
Yes.
Amazon.
Love
It was suggested, the producers suggested we also may want to try Disney Plus, because Disney seems to be putting documentaries and starting to purchase content that they did not um, produce themselves. But
that.
anyway, we don't know where it'll go, but we are looking at that end. That's the kind of quality it needs to be,
Mm.
and how we get there. So that's one thing that we're planning right now. Really, really excited about, and that's what our money from our gala coming in April will go towards.
Wow. Will that feature lots of different kinds of
Yes.
kids and families and situations and
Yeah.
how they deal and how they move forward?
Yeah. I don't even know if it'll have my story in it or any of our story exactly. Maybe that's up to the producer to, we haven't fleshed all that out yet,
Mhm.
but we envision it that it will follow maybe up to 8 different families. And it
Mhm.
might be over the course of a year. Maybe we visit them twice. Maybe some of them we only visit once, and from all different backgrounds. Maybe one is a single mom. Maybe they're trying totally different treatments. Maybe it's someone in New York City, someone in Denmark,
Oh,
someone in,
cool.
from different economic backgrounds, and um, all different walks of life, and kind of share how they are making it work. What I envision are those people that lit up my eyes like Amy and Cypress, and I'm like, wow, this could be beautiful.
Oh. Oh my God. You said that, once before, and a whole wave of chills goes through my body. There's just something so divine in what you're saying when you say it. It's like your eyes sparkle and you come to life. Wow, this could be beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like everything's in that moment when you say that, I realize everything is okay in a way. Like the way it is also
Hmm.
full of potential and beauty.
Hmm. And
And
everyone does it different.
yeah,
But I think that by having all these different stories, it helps people to find themselves in one of them, maybe.
yeah,
You
or
know, they
yeah,
might not be that one, but they might be this one. And it really, really, it is so powerful to see that it is things are possible. And
yeah.
whether possible just looks like a beautiful life together with your family
Mhm,
and being present in this moment, if that's possible, or if
mm,
possible is my kid will walk for the first time at 10 years old, and they
mm,
will take one step at 10 years old,
mhm.
then that's another possibility. and
Mm,
and those moments and those families, those are what we want to have on this documentary, and I'm
love
really excited about it.
it strikes me too that a possibility I can imagine is feeling less alone. And I imagine there is an unbearable aloneness that can possibly occur when one is just dealing on your own, trying to navigate this. And just to feel the network of people
Yes.
that exist in the world that are
Yes.
really, really got their sleeves rolled up and really trying to
Yeah.
navigate it too. I mean, I just can't imagine how healing and supportive that is. So big thank you to you and to Carter who runs and moves through you, in everything that you do. It's just an incredible gift to this world and to so many.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel very privileged that I get to do this, and to all of our supporters who I'm so grateful for all of our supporters who have just kind of given us the space
Right.
to be creative and to
Oh,
share stories.
wow.
Last year we wrote another book, um, which Ashley and Piper are in as one of the stories, and just to for our supporters out there, volunteers and monetary supporters who have, $1 at a time, $10,000, whatever it is, they have put us in a position that we can serve.
Yeah.
and that we can and be playful and creative and come up with these grand ideas and execute them.
Wow.
It's very beautiful thing. Many,
Oh,
many, many people.
I'm glad we can acknowledge all the people that fuel you and fuel your organization and help you to do all the creative things you're up to. Oh my goodness, what a gift that you sat down with me today. And I would be honored to do it anytime, and want to thank you so much for being so open with me. I learned a lot here, and I actually took away some really powerful kind of advice, for lack of a better word, just both to the medical people that are in the throes of not knowing what's going on, and also to parents who are, you gave just that beautiful gem of advice, like see if you can find somebody who's a couple miles down the road that can help you navigate the
Hmm.
terrain ahead. Just so many little bits of your own life story are actual huge gold nuggets for people who are listening.
I believe so. I believe so.
Yeah.
Because there was those little gold nuggets that I took away that meant so
Yeah.
much to me, whether it was just one meeting one person
Hmm.
one
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Like this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Emily, is there anything else you would like to say just to conclude this part of a conversation, and anything that we missed that feels like?
Gosh. Well, I mean, it's a lifetime, his little lifetime.
Mhm.
But I hope, thank you everyone who has bared with us this long. It's a very long story, but I didn't want to miss any of those details I shared with you today. Um, I I hope that someone somewhere found something useful in this conversation today
Mhm.
that can give them a little hope.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Polly.
Thank
Um,
you.
it was an honor to talk with you.
Thank you. It was an honor to be a listener. I think it's even without the advice, just that you're willing to step forward and share what it was like to be in that place where you didn't know what was going on and there was so much mystery all around you. It's just really a humbling experience to listen to.
Mhm.
And to see how far you've come with
Thank you.
your own story. Thanks.
Yeah, there's always there could be a part two. We talked about the one traumatic experience, the other one is losing a child. But
Yeah,
that's
I sense that could be a really important part too, and one I'm absolutely 100% in on if you want, or if you like the experience of talking with me, if it's helpful.
I do like it, and I feel that sometimes it may be useful for people because it was for me to find someone, one person, or anything out there that I could cling to during that moment of, feeling like I was drowning,
Mhm.
and to see that it's possible to get past it, or to know, like, because sometimes I actually have people write in and say, like, I have a friend who lost a child, or is dealing with a very difficult diagnosis. Is there something that you can recommend? I want to do something for them. There's
Mhm.
a lot of things that helped me, and I think,
That's so important.
and I hope that, and even if it's like a certain therapist type of therapy I did, or a book I read, or different things.
Which is
And
so huge and so significant.
yeah,
Mhm.
well, to be continued then.
Okay, I'm in if you want it. So thank you, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Polly.
All right, Emily. Bye.
Bye. I want to thank you again for, if you made it through this whole interview. I'm sorry, first of all, for the background noise. My one of my twins is home from school with a cough, and she's running up and down the stairs with my puppy. Um, so it's quite noisy. But if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I know that your time is valuable, and it means the world to me that you are here with us. Please write in to emily@thebrainpossible.com if you want to share something with me, if you have a question, or if there's any way that I can support you. And if you're interested in the gala we talked about, I just kind of want to put a plug in for that. So if you're curious, it will be on April 9th. You can learn about it at whoiscarter.org. It will be virtual, and we will live stream it, and it's going to be fun. We're going to bring a lot of generous people together, and dream about the possibilities of this documentary and bring it to fruition. It's going to be really awesome. Thank you.